So I started bodybuilding in 2016. So I did my first show March 2016. And yeah, I've been obviously competing ever since. I have had always have a background. I've always had a background in some sort of sports, so some sort of team sports most of the time. So I was into basketball, I was into netball, and I did gymnastics for a little bit, and then my longest one was actually I was into cheerleading for 8 years. And we were competitive cheerleaders. It was not like your regular 2, 4, 6, 8 type thing. It was like we went to competitions. We were doing a lot of tumbling, a lot of lifting up, obviously the competitors, a lot of jumps. So it was quite intense. So those types of workouts provide a lot of like cardiovascular fitness, all that sort of thing. So I actually got into bodybuilding because my cheerleading facilities was next to an old school gym. And I was like, how can I get stronger at what I'm already doing in terms of cheerleading, all that sort of thing. So I actually went to the gym next door, started training there because I wanted to get stronger at cheer. And then I kind of realized there was all these men on the walls, like all these bodybuilders and stuff on the walls. It was like all the it wasn't like people like the greats. It was actually like people that had competed at the gym. And that's what kind of intrigued me, because then I'd see their pictures and then see them in the gym and I'd be like, oh my God, I see your picture on the wall. That's amazing. And you get to know what their journey was. And it was so intriguing. And every time I kind of saw that, I was like, or heard someone's story, I was like, I really want to try that. And then I obviously ended up giving it a go and haven't stopped since.
And was that really like your first introduction even into what bodybuilding was at all? Or did you have any prior knowledge of what it was?
If I'm honest, no. So my sister was the one that got me into kind of training. She obviously, we went to the gym together quite a few times because she was into rugby. So she had to do her style of training and stuff. So as I was going to the gym next door, I was also going to the gym with my sister because I also didn't have a clue kind of what I was doing. I would, look up workouts on Google and what can I do for getting a stronger upper body? What can I do for glutes and quad and legs and core and stuff like that. So I didn't really know how to structure a workout. And obviously she did because her coach at the time for rugby was giving her a program. So I would just do her workouts. But I didn't know anything prior to even stepping foot into the gym about the bodybuilding world until I obviously started going to our old school kind of gym where a lot of bodybuilders were. And then, I kind of got into the world from just seeing other people do it. And it was really, really interesting. Once I'd then seen it, I was like, I kind of want to give this a go, but it wasn't like a must in my head. I was like, I didn't want to, it wasn't something that I was really like, I want to try it, but it's okay if I don't, because I kind of was a bit shy with it. And then my partner now, he was the one that got me into it, and he just said, I think you should do a show. You got a great shape for it. Just give it a go and see what happens. And then that was the first show I did, and I won that show, and then I won the overall as well, which was really, really cool.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating how the decoration on a gym wall, pictures on a wall can spiral into this butterfly effect of, changing your life, the course of your life. Isn't that just crazy?
Yeah, and I think it's cool because it's it intrigues you in a way that it wasn't done from online. It's done in a different way, because I think nowadays obviously there is social media. There are people that obviously get people motivated to want to do that. But I think I literally just saw these strong men on the walls. They were telling me about loads of people, and then getting me to kind of talk to other people, and I was like, this is so interesting. So yeah, it was really cool to kind of have that as my experience.
So going to kind of that first show, what was it for because you mentioned there was a little bit of can't remember the exact word, but shyness in a way, you weren't super oh, let's just get on stage and do this. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, whether you're a bodybuilder or not. Getting up in front of people is one of the most, I think it's actually even the biggest fear even before dying is for most people. It's crazy.
It's kind of the reason for that is because I've actually weirdly never been we've always kind of performed, because obviously being a cheerleader and kind of going up on stage wasn't an issue, but we would always be with our team. So we'd always go up on, out on stage and do our routines and stuff like that on stage together. But obviously this was completely eyes on you, not looking kind of like loads of different people. So it was just you focusing on you. And like I said, like I kind of had that shyness about me where I was like, I want to try it, but then also I'm kind of like scared to, in a way, if that makes sense. So when I kind of decided to then do it, I remember a specific moment when I was backstage just before I was going on for my first show. And I kind of was like, why am I doing this? Like I literally kind of not broke down, but I was like, all of a sudden you get that rush when you're backstage, like, and you're like, what, how did I get here? Like, why am I going up on stage? You know, I've dieted so hard for this, you know, show. I'm going on stage kind of in a bikini, nothing else, and just posing. How did I get here? Like, what's going on? And I think that kind of moment, it was kind of like do I carry on doing this or do I kind of like stop it? And as soon as I stepped on that stage and kind of like did my routine and like then I got off, I was like, that was amazing. Like I've never had that kind of sensation. And every time I get off stage, even now, I get that same feeling of like, that was so, like, it just feels like a rush. It feels like you're showing off all your hard work. Same as what I did with cheer. Like when we did our routines and stuff, during that process, it was a lot of hard work because obviously you're putting a lot into it. And then when you finish, it just feels so good. It's the same after stepping off the stage from like a bikini show and stuff. So good.
Yeah. Kind of looking back into that first prep though, like was there anything that like shocked you about like, oh wow, this process is kind of like different than I thought, or it's more challenging, or maybe it's not as challenging as what people were saying? Like what was that experience like for you?
I think so. Cheer for me taught me a lot of like, shout out to my cheer team, Zodiac's All Stars back in the UK. Brian and Andy, my coach at the time, the way that they taught our team was, it was like, it was really, I can't even explain it, but the way that they kind of taught us, especially as like we were younger at the time. So I was around like, when did I start? I started, I think I want to say it like around 17. So, and obviously I haven't done cheer for a very, very long time now, but that type of discipline from that kind of age, like they were like, if you want to be like they'd already embedded into us, if you want to be the best, you have to put in the hard work and effort to do that. And there were so many like achievements that we wanted to achieve as a team. We had to depend on each other. We had to work together. And if one of us is out, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. So we all have to be all in. And that kind of mentality made it a lot easier for me to kind of take over into bodybuilding, if that makes sense. So I really take my hats off to them because they really taught me that discipline from the get-go, because I don't think I would have had that discipline otherwise, because I was very much like, oh, I don't know, like very like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it or not. And I was in terms of commitment, like when I first was doing sports, I went into a lot of sports. So I did a lot of things. And even my parents at the time, they were like, you like things and then you kind of like get bored of them. So you like to try new things all the time. So cheer was the one thing that I stuck out for the longest amount of time. And then obviously bodybuilding was the one that took over that. So for me, I feel like the discipline side of things, it was easy to transition those skills I'd learned, I guess, at cheer. But I would say the environment and the way it is was obviously very different because you're only dependent on yourself. So obviously before we could depend on a team, we could work together, this and the other, whereas bodybuilding was kind of isolating. And actually when I was getting ready for my first show, I was still at cheer, but I didn't tell anyone because I was like, almost like not embarrassed, but I was a little bit like, this is a new thing. And I don't really know what I'm also getting myself into either, like what this bodybuilding thing is, where I'm going to go with it. So I'm just going to keep it on the hush hush and kind of like almost work in silence. And it was after, I remember going into the cheerleading, like, because we had cheer training the day after my show. And they were like, you can't miss it. Obviously, they didn't know that I was doing a show. I just kind of said like, oh, I'm going to be a little bit late. Hope that's okay. Turning up like bright orange, like, I did a bodybuilding show and I just won the whole thing. And they were like, wow, that's so cool. And then like that support was really, really cool. But I think for me, it started to become easier when I started to obviously tell people about it and share my journey. That's what I say to some people sometimes, like sometimes it helps a lot more to share your journey so people can kind of understand where you're coming from instead of just hiding it away. But no, obviously to answer your question, I think the hardest part about it was just it being by myself, because I was so used to team sports. Going to kind of a solo thing and depending on myself and being like, can I depend on myself, was probably the hardest part. But obviously you do that by learning and, just keep being consistent with the process and seeing what happens.
the biggest thing for me that I've noticed and that I've kind of, I feel like gained over the last couple of years of talking to people is like, whatever it is you're doing, just like do it, like put yourself
Yeah.
into it, put yourself in that situation, really give yourself to it, because you're going to, like, whether you end up standing on the Olympia stage or not, you're going to like become this more evolved person, I think.
Yeah, it's the best version of yourself, and that's what I like. I really like it because it's always being better than before, and that's what it's always about. Like when you step on stage, you don't want to be the same, unless obviously the judges have told you to. But you always, even then, going to be slightly better. You're going to be doing something to be slightly better than before, and that's what I think a lot of people really get. I say addicted to, but it is an obsession in a way that you just want to be better and keep being better and doing it better for yourself because you have a passion for it. And I love that side of the sport.
So after that first show, when you win, like that's definitely like a unique experience.
Yes.
How did that impact you going into that next show? And like, how did that change? Did it change your mind, I guess, of like what bodybuilding kind of meant to you?
Yeah, I think the thing is, and I get asked this question all the time, and I sometimes kind of rethink it and kind of think like, what, if that would have gone differently, for example, like if I'd gotten, last, maybe, would I still have the same outcome as, I did? And I think my answer is yes, because the next show I did, I actually got like 7th out of like 9. So the way that it kind of works, so that show that I did wasn't associated with the NPC. It was a smaller show that was just kind of it was a university show. So it was just a university-based bodybuilding show that goes on once a year. So it wasn't a big show, but it was something to kind of like, dip my toes in the water type thing. Then when I went into kind of the NPC, I actually got, like I said, 7th out of like 9 or something like that. So from going from that such high, I had such a great, momentum and mentality. Like I'm in it to win. Like I'm motivated to do this. Let's go. And then when I got that, I was like, oh, I've worked so hard. And like, how did I get from this to this? Like, that's, disappointing in a way because I put my, heart and soul into it. I was like, okay, let's go for the next one. I think I got 4th. At the next one, I was like, okay, that was better. We brought in a leaner shape, we changed a few things, this, that, the other. Okay, what can we do to be better? And I always had that mentality of what can we do to be better, even after we were trying. So how it works in the UK, it was at the time, I had to get top 3 to then go to the British finals. Kind of like it was kind of similar to what it is over in the US. You have to try and qualify to go to nationals or junior USAs or something like that, if that makes sense. So I was trying to get that into that top 3 for a long time. It took me 4 shows to get to that top 3. And then when I got to the British, you have to be in the top 10 to then, it was the way it worked was like there's however many of you on stage, and then they cut it down into top 10, and then top 10 do their individuals. So everyone's always like, I want to get into top 10 so I can do my individual routine. And I didn't get top 10. So it was like, I'm putting in all this work and I'm not reaping any of the reward. But this whole time, obviously the process of, getting, I say, quote unquote, knocked down, it was building up my determination and mentality for wanting to be great in the sport, if that makes sense. And that's something I think I truly value more than winning, if that makes sense. Like the win at the beginning was great because it gave me that confidence to, keep going to that next show. But those fallbacks or not placing in the top 3 was the thing that was actually pushing me to be better. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes I think winning is like, it sometimes doesn't let your guard down. It obviously feels amazing. And, everyone works so hard, but I love sometimes getting pushed down because you push even harder the next time.
Yeah, I think it's so much harder to learn from winning too, because like you do feel so good and you're like, oh, I must be where I need to be. When you lose, it's like, obviously I can do better. Let's look at what I can do better. I think it takes a lot more discipline to be like, okay, I won, let's be happy. But what in reality can I still do better? Because even like in bodybuilding, especially, every time you win, you're facing stiffer competition. So you have to take that into account and be like, I look great for who I just competed against, but let's look at who I'm about to compete against.
Yeah, and that was the thing I didn't know. Obviously, I knew there was going to be different competitors and all that type of thing, but because I was so new into it, I just, didn't have that mentality of, all that knowledge, or what, not I say mentality, that knowledge of, you know, there's going to be different people there. They're going to be potentially looking for different things. They're going to be different judges. That wasn't in my mind. So for me, I'm like, okay, let's bring the same physique. I won that last show, so I can easily win this show, you know? And it changes. And then, like I said, once you then know and understand what goes on, then it makes it a little bit easier to, well, I say easier, clearer to kind of get better.
How long did it take you to, you know, because bodybuilding with your body, everything takes time, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take you to kind of get to that understanding of like, as much as I like put into this on a daily basis, this stuff is going to take months and it's going to take years to like develop?
I didn't really know how long it would take. So like, for example, like it took me, this is just like numbers, but it took me 2.5 years to turn pro. And then it took me 4 years as a pro to get to the Olympia, which was obviously last year. So for me, I wasn't really focusing on how long. I'm like, oh, how long am I going to be in this game for? Or how long is it going to take me? I was kind of like, okay, this year the goal is to do this. Let's try and achieve it, type thing, if that makes sense. And I feel like sometimes focusing on that mentality is the better, like what's the bigger picture, you know? Like as an amateur, you're wanting to be competitive in bodybuilding, it's always going to be moving up the ranks. So amateur, you want to be pro. So, okay, realistically, do I need more muscle? Do I need more conditioning? You look at the kind of facts of what you actually need to do, then kind of scale on a plan with your coach, obviously, to see what you then need to do. And then when you're pro, same again, how long is it going to take me to get to the Olympia? Let's try and focus on, do I need more muscle? Do I need more conditioning? Same again. And be realistic with yourself and seeing what needs to be done. Do shows, get your feedback. Because honestly, I do think that it's very underrated, because I think people sometimes, you know, they don't want to get on stage. Like, for example, if you've just turned pro, they don't want to do their pro debut. They want to grow for 2 years. I think that's good to a certain, for my category anyway, for example, for bikini, I think sometimes it's good to take time off stage, but it's also good to be on stage so the judges can actually give you like what you actually need to work on. Do you know what I mean? Like if you know what you need to work on and stuff like that, but I think the best way to really fully know is to be out there, you know? But no, I think it's really important to make sure that you're patient with this sport, because it is always evolving, it is always changing, and the girls are getting better and better. From obviously, I mean, the competitors in bodybuilding are getting better and better and better. So it's a case of you have to be patient with it. And that's something I really did learn along the way. Like, and I always have been so patient. Like there's some people that I know literally got their pro cards on one day. And I actually know someone that got their pro card and won their pro show on the same day and went to the Olympia. So all in once, their dreams have kind of all happened on one day. And obviously that's absolutely amazing, but I couldn't have asked for my journey to be better, because I'm happy that I got to be able to experience those downfalls, those beat downs, where it makes me appreciate the sport and appreciate what I've worked for.
Yeah. And do you see those like more competitors now versus when you did start that are like what kind of levels above, you know, just because bodybuilding I feel like is getting more attention, so more people are like getting into it? Does it seem like that they're like the amateur level now is like kind of more elevated than it was before because of?
Oh yeah, I think the amateur level is absolutely, it's crazy now. Like I love seeing how much, you know, how much potential there is to be for the sport to be even bigger. Because then, and the reason I kind of see that is because, like, you know, when you see like nationals, junior USAs, all that sort of thing, the competitors now and the overalls that kind of win at those shows are absolutely incredible, because you see them then going into the pro league almost immediately getting, you know, in a good spot straight away versus building themselves up. Because, you know, I think it's so great to see how well our sport is doing. And you can also know, because there's so many more, this is obviously me speaking for bikini, and even for any other class, to be fair, there's a lot more competitors in each class now. There's always been a lot of bikini athletes, you know, and men's physique and, you know, even classic. But I do think there's been over the years a huge amount more in the shows, which I think is really, really good to see, because it shows that our sport is growing. And that's so exciting.
Yeah, I think it is interesting with the new, you know, divisions and things, like how that could potentially change the sport, you know, in the next 10 years, 15 years. And it just makes me wonder, like, how are the new athletes going to impact the amateurs today to kind of, how they're going to build their physiques? What, are they going to go into classic? Are they going to go into, men's physique? Are they going to go into bikini? How, like,
Yeah.
what is that turning point for the sport going to look like? I'm wondering.
Yeah. That's exciting. I think it's exciting because, again, I think when you go pro as well, you then have the ability to kind of, I mean, even as amateur, you do get the ability to kind of choose where you want to kind of land, if that makes sense. So, for example, like there's now a smaller gap between figure and bikini and figure, because they've now got wellness. So it kind of allows the girls, and I know a lot of people from even physique that have dropped down to wellness because they're like, you know what, I don't think I can be competitive in physique anymore, or they don't want to have, or don't want to build as much anymore. So they want to try and just maintain a slightly healthier physique for them. If, for example, same with figure, some people in bikini are like, I'm too, quote unquote, big for bikini now. So my body naturally holds muscle quite a large amount. So I'm going to push up, so I think that's really cool that the sport is evolving in a way that it allows us to push our bodies and challenge it in a different way. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's so cool. And again, it's the same with bodybuilding, where, you'll see bodybuilders nowadays, some of them will go into classic, some will do 2-on-2, and then kind of go into open. Like the switches around, especially for like, the greats that have been around for a long time. I think it's cool to showcase that off, because it then shows other athletes, like there are so many different avenues you can go down in bodybuilding.
Yeah. No, I think it really opens up the sport.
One, it's a good business move, obviously, for the world of bodybuilding, because obviously they want more people to join the sport. And if they make it so hard for people to be able to join the sport, people aren't going to join, if that makes sense. So I think it's good to have variety where people can then, grow, challenge themselves, be in different categories as such. So I think that's really good from what they've done. But no, I agree with what you said for 100%.
So when you gained your pro card, right? Like you said, you won your first show, right? And then you kind of like, you went to 7th, you went to 4th. So you're kind of climbing back up. And then when you do reach that pro level, was there any thought of like, okay, that was really cool what I just did to get my pro card, but now I have to almost like restart that cycle in a way?
Yeah. I think sometimes I say this is kind of like what's the word? Like it's a good and a bad thing, this kind of mentality where it is a case of, we've just got our pro card. I think sometimes in that moment you have to make sure that you do celebrate the wins. Like that's something for me, I have had to almost force upon myself to make sure that I am celebrating what I have just done. Like when you get your pro card, you get your invite to the Olympia, you win a pro show or place at a pro show or place anywhere. Like I think you do have to celebrate those wins and make sure you do celebrate them and don't be too hard on yourselves, because it's very easy to just slip into that mode of like, okay, right, what's next? Or how can I get better? And just completely forget about what you've just achieved. Because even, I know obviously this is cheesy and whatnot, but I think it's very true, is even stepping on stage is an achievement. It's a very, very good thing that people like can even make it to stage, because it's like a 1%, type thing to do, like in the entire human race, not a lot of people have the confidence or the, dedication to actually step on stage. So you should be proud of that to start off with. And that's something that I always have to try and remind myself of, because sometimes it is like, when you don't get the placing you want, or where you want to place higher or you want to do better, and it gets you down a lot and it makes you think less of yourself a lot of the times. I've gone through that a lot where, like I said before, it took me 4 years to get to the Olympia, and there was so many times where I was like, should I just give up? Because clearly I'm not meant for this. Like clearly I'm not worthy enough to be at the Olympia. Like I just shouldn't be there, because I've tried so many times, I've been so close every single time, and maybe it's just not meant to be. But that dedication, kind of passion and like drive just kept me going of, wanting to be better than before. And like, that's the good thing about it. Obviously, bodybuilding and wanting to be better, that keeps you wanting to push, if that makes sense, because you can be better every single time. So I think that's the good part. Obviously the bad part is obviously, I say bad part, but the harder part is obviously being too hard on yourself sometimes. So to anyone listening, 100%, it's a case of making sure that you do celebrate the wins. It's hard to remember kind of, being that consistent is a good thing. Consistency will win every single time. Like for me, the reason I feel like I did well at this year's Olympia and why I've had the success I have had this year is because I was consistent throughout the whole time. Don't get me wrong, everyone's consistent. And I think it is a case of, you just have, like I said before, you just have to be patient and your time will come. It's just a matter of time.
How has your prep kind of like evolved and changed and got more efficient over your career, whether that be like the true protocols of how you're doing it or how you organize it, how you manage it? Like how has it kind of evolved over time?
I think the way it's evolved is I'm definitely doing less in terms of, when I'm in a prep now, like the last 2 years of prep, I would say it's mainly me being, okay, I have to lock in now. I have to focus on what I've got coming up versus before I was, some years I was working 2 jobs. I was, running up and down the country, running seminars and doing in-person posing. Like I would do 20 hours of posing on my feet most weekends to, afford to be able to pay for shows and all that type of thing. So I think now, and don't get me wrong, I'm very happy that I'm in this position now. Obviously, I've worked to get here, so it's great. But I think for me, it's kind of making sure that I do plan efficiently. Like, right, the next 20 weeks or the next 18 weeks or however long I do for my preps, I'm like, okay, I have to put me first, and I have to make sure that my prep is always going to be first. Because sometimes, I'd be doing prep, but I'd also have all my other life stuff going on as well. So I'd, like I said, be working my job, doing this, that, the other. And people don't have the luxury of doing that sometimes. And I think now I've created the life that I can be able to do that, which I'm very grateful for. So I think for me, that's the main thing. And then I think for me, longer preps have always worked better. So the last 2 years we've done longer preps and they've always had a better outcome. So I think for me, that's one big factor is like having just a longer amount of time to get ready. And then we're ready early and then we kind of cruise in and it's nicer. So that's kind of a very simple form. A lot of people say that is like, obviously that's kind of how a lot of coaches, well, I assume a lot of coaches kind of would want to try and put that across to clients when they first start. Like, let's try and do a longer prep if they need to. But I've always been the type of person that likes a longer prep.
Gotcha. Yeah. And to me, it seems like with all the people that I've talked to, whether you're, a single person doing bodybuilding or you're a single mom with 4 kids or you're, in a relationship with somebody else who may or may not do bodybuilding, it's just crazy that like all of these people can make this thing work. To me, there's like no real excuse why I can't do something in my life.
No, I think that's and the thing is with bodybuilding has really taught me that throughout life, like if you want something, you have to go and work for it and go and get it. And I think that's one of the main important things. I think a lot of people do think, the world's against them sometimes. And, there's a lot of things stopping them from doing things, but there's literally nothing stopping anyone from doing literally anything. So it's kind of like, you just have to have the mentality to want to do it and to see it through and be consistent with it. And once you've done that, it's then like, it proves to yourself like, okay, cool. What's the next thing I can do? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I think that's so true. Like starting small, like, oh, I just, accomplished getting out of bed whenever my alarm went off the first time.
Yeah.
Like
or like going to the gym, like
right,
however many times a week, like after a week, like being like, okay, cool, I completed that goal. And like before I couldn't do that. So now what's the next thing? Like, I think it's just taking smaller steps. And like I said, it all rolls around to being patient, being consistent with your journey. And then if you know that you're putting in the hard work and effort, it can then be a great one.
So once you reach that, reach that Olympia stage,
if you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout.
How does that experience compare to like the buildup of the experience, if that makes sense?
The only way I can describe it is like it exceeded all of my expectations. Like you say it's the best of their best, and it was literally the best of the best. Like backstage, backstage with Chris Bumstead, because I think the classic had just been on, or it was going on after us or something like that. And I remember being backstage and just randomly spotting Chris Bumstead, and I'm like, what is going on? And like, it's just something that, when you've worked so hard to get to that like NBA top level of your sport. And I was like, just soaking it in. I was like, and I've said this on, multiple interviews. If I had got last place at the Olympia, I would not have cared, because one, I was at my best. The process of my Olympia prep was the best it had ever been. And I was just in a place where I was like, I have earned to get here, and I'm surrounded by people that have earned their spot here. This could not feel any better. So like, I just went out there like, there is no expectation for this, because I just want to showcase off what I have brought to this stage, and like, I know it's my best. So went out there and just did my thing, and it was honestly the best experience like ever. I actually went to in the Olympia in 2019 to watch it. The last time it was actually in Vegas was in 2019, and I watched that, and I remember like, because I obviously missed the qualifications by a few points at that point in that year and the year before actually, and I was just watching the bikini in awe, like, I will be up there one day. Like, it was like a very significant moment for me, where I was like looking at it like, this will happen one day. It will happen one day. And, it kind of then made that the moment of the actually doing the Olympia last year, like so much even like sweeter, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you feel like because you did reach that level after, years of working towards it, that it took a little pressure off of yourself? Or do you feel like it maybe even also added some pressure because it's like, oh, I got here. This is like what people are seeing me as now.
I feel like, well, firstly, I feel like for me, the pressure comes from representing, not because anyone puts it on me, but I put the pressure on myself sometimes. But because I was, the only UK athlete since I think 2019 or 18 that had been to the Olympia, that kind of pressure probably falls harder on me than it would be like after like years of work. Because, I think for me, it was like a greater feeling after putting in that amount of work and then finally getting that kind of felt even better, if that makes any sense, instead of just getting it. Because I remember when I got the invite, it was the Arnold UK, and it was just the reaction that I had. I was kind of like, I remember standing backstage, like beside, and obviously waiting for either second or, first, and they called second, and I was so shocked, because I was almost saying in my head, like, waiting for my name to come out. I was waiting for my name to be called second, because it happened so many times. So I was like, there's no way that it's going to be now. There's just no way. And I kind of was like, Phoebe, no, this is going to happen. And then I remember it then calling second, and I was like, oh shit, like, it's actually me, like, I won it. So it was kind of like an amazing feeling, like all of that work, especially because it was in the UK as well. Like, my family was there, a lot of my friends were there. Like, it was an amazing like experience and like memory. But no, I think the main pressure probably for me comes from, representing my country. But I love that I get to be able to represent my country in that way, and like carry, the bikini name for the UK on my shoulders. I love it.
And when you're at the Olympia, obviously there's athletes from all over the world, right? Is there almost like an international like sisterhood or whatever you want to call it, and then you have like Americans, but I'm sure like everybody kind of still gets along and like does stuff together.
No,
but
and do you know what? I think because I think I was when did I start doing shows in America? I think it was 2019. I did my first show over in the US, and I wanted to do that because I wanted to travel. I wanted to go back to the US. I hadn't been since like I think 2014. So I'm in 2019, and I was like, I want to travel the world, and I want to compete with the best. So why not start in America? And I think not just obviously it being an international thing, or like Americans versus international. I think people just get to know people, and I think social media definitely has brought 100% has brought that around to us. Because when I'm backstage with people, you get talking, you're obviously lining up with people, and the energy backstage is like, sometimes obviously it can be a bit quiet, and I think people backstage have to respect the way that people get ready for shows, because sometimes people are a little bit nervous to get on stage, or they just want to zone in and all that type of thing. So I completely respect that. I'm the type of person that loves to just talk to other people and kind of get to know people, even if I don't know who they are, because it calms my nerves. So I don't think about getting up on stage and all that type of thing. So for me, the backstage part is very like fun. I always like to kind of like be around people and chat and this, that, the other. So I do think there's a big sisterhood, and it was really fun for the Olympia because there were so many people that I know, through Instagram, through supporting others from online for years, and we were all in the same place, and it was just such an amazing like feeling, like we were all lining up before we were going on, just chatting, having fun. And that's what it's all about, is like making the journey like more fun and more experiencing more and sharing it with people.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would be surprised when you say that people are nervous at that level.
Well, actually it's the complete opposite. Like I think for me, I can't really remember. I don't think I was nervous for the Olympia because mentally I was ready for it, in terms of like feelings wise. I was like, I've built up to this moment. Like I'm so ready for it, I think. But I do think like some shows, like I do get very nervous for, like even now, like, so I do think it definitely is kind of a myth almost, that when people say like the higher you climb, the less nervous you get. Sometimes it's the opposite. Like the higher you climb, the more nervous you get, because you might have more pressure on you, but no, I think it is still definitely, it's more of a human thing. Just because you're higher in the ranks, it doesn't mean that you don't get nervous.
Yeah. Whenever you get to the Olympia level, how does like the after Olympia experience, how did that go for you? How did, because you reached this peak, right? And then, it's kind of like, okay, how do we get back there? Like, how did you handle that mentally?
Yeah. I think it was like, so for me, obviously I did Texas the week before. So, and I won that, which was, I think for me, that was a very good confidence boost and good momentum for me to kind of do that. And it was a risk, don't get me wrong, but it was almost like it was kind of a win-win for me as such, because obviously I was a fresh Olympian going into an Olympia. So if I'd done the Texas show before, it was a case of, I could just get feedback and see what I can do to improve the week before, because I was ready. We were ready about 5 weeks out for the Olympia. So we were in a good spot, which was really, really good. I think the aftermath of the Olympia, I don't think I celebrated it as much as I could have, probably, if that makes sense, because I was already focusing on what was next. So I do feel like it was very like short-lived in a way. But I do think that now it's a case of obviously just getting yourself prepared for the next show and making sure that you're better for the next time around, which, don't get me wrong, there's always that certain amount of pressure where you then feel, okay, now I've just done that, I have to do that but better. And sometimes that does take a lot of time to do, which is why obviously I did, one of the reasons as to why I pulled out obviously of the Arnold's, because I was going to do the Arnold's, which was very, very close to the Olympia this year. So I just gave myself a little bit more time, which I needed. And then obviously I had other things going on. So for me, it was a case of I needed to pick and I needed to make a smart choice. And, I had to choose me in that moment. But I do feel like sometimes post Olympia, it can hit, or post just any show, it can hit people quite hard. So you have to try and make sure that you always line yourself up in a good place to make sure that you are, in a good place to then keep achieving. Because for me, sometimes I do get those days where, I do feel like I want to step on stage again. I want to be on stage now, or, how am I going to get back to where I was before? Like in terms of, we put in a lot of hard work and effort into that. Can I do that again? And I do think I can do that again. It's just a case of making sure that you don't, not believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself.
Yeah. And I think with the Olympia this year being, I think sometime in November, right? It'll be it'll be interesting to see how that changes, like what the Arnold looks like and what the athletes look like, and all that kind of goes.
100%.
How does it feel though to be like up there now? Like you're an Olympian. How does it feel to know that like people are now looking up to you the way that you looked up to people who, when you were coming up on that stage?
I think I would say it feels surreal in a way, because for me, I still, it sounds really weird, but I still feel like a normal human in a way, where I'm just competing, like I'm just doing my thing. And like, just because I've gotten to like a certain level of athlete, it doesn't feel like I've changed much as a person in a way. I know I have, but sometimes it makes me feel like I haven't actually changed that much. I am still that, the girl that likes to, go out and have fun and see her friends. And I still feel like I have a very normal life still, if that makes sense. But I do put my all into, wanting to show my journey off more, because I think people relate to that a lot. And I do think it's an important thing to do at almost like this high level. You don't have to, because you don't owe anyone anything. But I do think if I had this kind of, someone to look up to in terms of them sharing their, their journeys and this, that, the other along the entire way, and being really open and honest about kind of what they're going through, this, that, the other, it would have made certain situations sometimes easier in a way. Like, sometimes you think like, why do I feel like this? Like, does everyone feel like this? And you realize as the time goes on, like, yeah, loads of people feel like that, but no one kind of says anything sometimes, because they want to paint this picture of, I am okay. And that, I don't think that's them. I think that is sometimes social media, where, social media paints a highlight, or we see it as a highlight. And we forget that, everyone goes through struggles. Just because it's not showcased, it doesn't mean it's not happening. So I do think that I am very blessed to be in a position where I can be that person to say, hey, we feel like everyone feels like this now. You're not the only one, because I share my journey so openly, and I do enjoy that part a lot.
I think people too connect more with a person who is relatable, and if somebody's going through a hard time, it's like, oh, well, everybody else, like you said, everybody else seems like everything's perfect. And I think a perfect person to kind of like to use as an example is like David Goggins, right? Like he'll tell his story anytime and be like, yeah, this is what I was going through during these, before I was kind of like what people see me as now. And even now I still like, I'll look at my shoes for 30 minutes before I go out and actually run in the morning. And it makes it easier to be like, okay, I'm not the only one, or I'm not like a weirdo, or I'm not defective.
I'm not the only one that goes through like these phases of like, I don't want to get up and do my fasted cardio. Like this morning I was like, I really don't want to get up and do my fasted cardio, but I did it. And it's a case of like, you still have to have that consistency factor, but it doesn't mean it's not difficult, consistency doesn't mean it's easy.
Right. And I think to me, I actually feel so much better whenever I don't want to do something and then I do it versus
and
when
then you do it.
Yeah. Versus when it's like, oh, it's easy for me to do this. Like that doesn't bring me as much like satisfaction at the end of the day versus whenever I beat my own mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely valid. Like sometimes you'll feel really like, I really don't want to do this. And then once you do it, it's like the endorphins kind of kick in where you're like, I completed it and I really didn't want to do that before. So yes, pat on the back type thing.
Definitely. And I think bodybuilding is such a cool sport because it encourages that kind of like self-development, encourages the just, put yourself through a little bit of misery, a little bit of suffering for a very short period of time. And you're 100%. Going to see like all of these good things come out of it. I think if we can push that as like what bodybuilding truly is versus kind of what some of the stereotypes are about it, I think that, I think the sport will definitely continue to grow.
Yeah, 100% agree.
It was really good getting to talk to you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit about your journey and kind of what you're going through here lately. It was really cool.
No, thank you so much for having me. Like I always like doing, like I said, sharing my journey openly and honestly, and hopefully it can, help someone else kind of going through their journey of either becoming a pro or an athlete or just in general life.
Definitely. I really appreciate it. And before we head out though, if you want to share your social media or anything like that, you can go ahead and do that.
Yes, of course. So if you want to, follow my journey, you can follow me on Instagram, which is just Phoebe Hagan, _ after. And then I'm also on YouTube, which is just Phoebe Hagan. And then I am a posing coach and I have a website that can help you, improve and perfect your posing as much as we can. So that's the posing portal if anyone obviously wanted to join up and sign up.